Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and welcome to the Care for the Caregiver workshop presented by Michelle O'Rourke and Kathy Ellis. Michelle did have her introduction already, so she said I didn't have to go through everything again. But I'll tell you a little bit about Kathy Ellis as well. Kathy is a member of the Southwest LHIN Palliative Pain and Symptom Management and Consultation Program as a nurse educator for Oxford and Elgin counties. Kathy has a Bachelor of Science degree in nursing, as well as certification in hospice palliative care with the Canadian Nurses Association. She participates on many initiatives to improve the provision of hospice palliative care in both Oxford and Elgin counties by building capacity for care providers. Her role involves interdisciplinary education and provides courses in the fundamentals of hospice palliative care, comprehensive advanced palliative care education, which we call CAPC, and learning essential approaches to palliative end-of-life care, which is the LEAP course. So we can always learn more about caregiving for ourselves as helpers and as personal caregivers. So I welcome Michelle and Kathy.
Okay, so hello again, everyone. And I'm thrilled to be able to work with Kathy on this part of the afternoon. What we want you to know our objectives for the afternoon. We're going to build on the work that I talked about care and compassion. Have this be an interactive and reflective experience for you. But mostly, it's going to be about self-care. How are we going to reflect on our own caregiving experiences and then come up with a plan that is going to be helpful to us as we try to bring more balance into our lives? I think that the first part is there will be some things that we share together, but the writing that you're going to do this afternoon is your own writing. So we just want you to know that what we're asking you to reflect on in these sheets, you're going to take home. You don't have to talk to anybody else about it, okay? This afternoon is a retreat. It's 2 hours that you get to put into your life to just be able to take care of yourself, to reflect on your own caregiving experiences and reflect on your own balance in your life. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kathy just so that she can get us started.
Thanks, Michelle. Can everybody hear me? Yeah? I probably don't need the microphone. Anybody that knows me knows I don't need the microphone, but it's an honor for me to actually co-facilitate this workshop this afternoon with Michelle. Talked to her lots on the phone, and her bubbly voice and enthusiasm really encouraged me to keep going on this retreat today. And anybody that knows me or has taken one of my courses knows that self-care is very, very near and dear to my heart. If you don't look after yourself, we cannot possibly do the work that we do. And I loved that quote about the anchor, because that's what we want to do, right? We want to be doers. We want to do what we can to help people. We want to fix things. We want to make sure that the folks that we're caring for, they're centered and grounded into the sand. But this afternoon, we're going to ask you to pull up your anchor and just drift away and think about what's important. And it's you. You're important. So just this afternoon, there's no test, Shirley, no test at all. But if you need a pen, please let me know, because there is some writing that we're going to want you to do. So before we get started, you know a little bit about Michelle and I. So we just wondered if you could talk in your tables, just take a couple of minutes, introduce yourselves. I know some of you are all sitting in groups. These folks all here from Sakura House, they all know each other. But, just say, where you're from, why you wanted to come to this workshop. I think that's important to reflect on why you wanted to come to this. I see some nurses and things in the room. I thought they'd all be down at the pain and symptom management. So I'm encouraged to see some nurses here doing the self-care, because I've been a nurse for probably longer than some of you in this room have been alive. And it's something that we take for granted for sure. So if you just take a couple of minutes and introduce yourselves around the table, that'd be great. Okay, we'll bring everybody on back. Lots of great chatter in the room. I hope everybody's got a better sense of who's at the table. before we start, Michelle and I just want to take a few minutes and pay tribute to not only you as the caregiver, but those people that you've had the privilege to care for. So during the workshop, we're going to leave this candle lit. If Kathy can get it lit. We're going to leave that candle lit as a reminder, not only of the folks that we've cared for and the work that you've done. So at the end, we'll have a little ceremony. We'll blow out the candle, and we'll leave this place hopefully with a better sense of self-awareness, because that's what we want to encourage this afternoon, is to think it's all about me this afternoon. Okay? So these journeys that we go on with people are very, very difficult, and oftentimes we forget about us. And I've heard lots of excuses over the years. It's selfish. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll think about that next week. I'll do that when I retire. I hear that lots too, right? So we want you to take laughter back there from the folks that are retired, but we want to ask you to just pull out the self-care inventory that we provided with you. And we just wondered if you could take a few minutes and honestly answer these questions. And it's kind of like that scale that Michelle gave the other folks that don't have the benefit of being here with us, to rate yourself on how well you really do pay attention to yourself. So just take 5 or 10 minutes and complete it. And like I said, please be very honest, because those ones that you're scoring low on, those 3 and below, those are the ones where you should be starting to pay some attention. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody need a pen? This is the only test of the afternoon. I think our self-care should be to turn up the air conditioning. I see some people going like this with their papers, right? I apologize. It's quite warm in here. It wasn't when we were up here earlier. It was actually one of the cooler rooms in the place. But aha moments when you completed that inventory? Some scores that you thought, wow, I didn't think I'd score that low, or I didn't think I'd score that high? I'm sure some of the young mums in the room scored 1 or 0 on sleep. So now that Michelle and I have stressed you out about completing the self-care inventory, we're going to take some time now and relax. So we're going to do a hand massage. And if anybody's ever had their nails done, had a manicure done, how nice that feels when the manicurist is massaging your hands and you just kind of float away. This is an opportunity for those folks in the room who are bedside caregivers. This is an opportunity for you to, offer that presence, offer that being to that person that you're caring for with that subtle touch of the gentle hand massage. And put a little bit on their hand. Just put a little bit on their hand. Just one hand. We're only going to massage one hand. So just put a little bit on their hand. You've got it. Okay, good. Perfect. You guys are keeners. You're all ahead of the game. Okay. So I want you to gently massage the lotion over the person's hand with gentle strokes, and apply some subtle pressure, but this just warms the hands and increases the circulation. Then I want you to flip the hand over and smooth it over the palm and the fingers, working from the tips of the fingers up to the wrist and then back down to the fingers. So slow, gentle strokes from the tips of your fingers up to the wrist and then back again. And then massage each individual finger, starting with the pinky. Pinch the tip of the finger firmly for a moment, then using firm, short strokes, massage the finger towards the knuckle, and then finally squeeze the finger all over. And then move to the next finger and do the same. Little pinch and small, smooth strokes up the knuckle, and squeeze the finger, and then move to the next. And then go to the next finger, and another pinch, and then small, smooth strokes. And then once you've worked your way to the thumb and done that, Massage the back of the wrist. And with the hand still face down, use both your thumbs to massage the wrist in small circular motion. First with the middle of the wrist and then to the outside. Then massage the palm and then turn the hand over. And cradle the hand in both of yours. Then stretch the fingers and hold the person's hand in yours. And interface your fingers with theirs and stretch the fingers apart. And then grasp the whole hand in yours and gently push back to stretch the wrist a bit. Then slowly and carefully turn the wrist from right to left and then left to right. And then hold the hand in yours, palm down, and give several long strokes with your palm and fingers. Begin at the back of the wrist and smooth your hand down towards the fingers. And now you're done.
What we want to do right now is I just want to review a couple of those slides that I used this morning because I had to run through them really rather quickly. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges or barriers that we face when we're talking about trying to work self-care into our lives. So as I said earlier, taking stock of what's on your plate, prioritizing, delegating. Yes, there are some things that we can't take off, but sometimes even when it's a difficult decision, there are some things that we may need to. Finding time for yourself every day. And if you haven't had time to do this, start with 5 minutes, start with 10 minutes. Unplugged time, trying to be quiet. It helps that whole thing of presence and being comfortable in silence is a discipline. And so the more often you really try to do that, even driving maybe with the radio turned off, just trying to be in the quiet, trying to be in silence, just for small periods of time so that it becomes something that you're not as uncomfortable with, so that when it happens, when you're doing it with someone that you care for, you can enter into it and be very, very present and very filled with intent. What refreshes you? Maybe it's going for walks, maybe it's gardening, maybe it's music. Maintaining a personal life outside of work. Sometimes people are so, they're such a workaholic and they take their work home and, you know, they're working on it at night and then they're getting up early and they're working on it in the morning. And sometimes we feel like that's the only way that I can stay on top of it. And yet we really have to take that hard line to see how much of that is maybe a way of changing how we manage our work, how much of it is maybe being able to go to our supervisor and say, we need to talk about shifting this a little bit because I can't do this 24/7. And so being real, being honest, not being afraid to say that I'm falling behind. Remembering to play, going out in the rain, in the puddles. Whether exercise is just going for a walk, just 5 minutes, little things that we can do. Working on our sleep patterns and our sleep habits, working on eating well. Seeking out support is so important. Who do you vent to? And I know when you're talking about confidential things, it has to often be someone who's in the circle of care, or if you're venting to a friend, you're not saying names, you're not saying specifics, but you're able to let it go somewhere. If you carry that around inside of you, it becomes so toxic and so heavy. As I said, taking time to see what you've given as well as what you've received. And that's going to be part of our exercise in a few minutes. So I think that'll become a little bit more clear as to how you can maybe work that into your self-reflective practice. What are your own spiritual needs? How do you tend to your own inner self? You know, are there issues you're trying to work through? What gives you meaning and purpose in life? What are you reading? What are you listening to? What brings you joy? What nourishes you? those kinds of things. And again, engaging in self-reflective practice. Are you mindful or is your mind full? And so how do we start to be able to empty it just for 5 minutes at a time so that we can just be still? You know, our brains were made not to work so hard. We think that multitasking is like a badge that we wear, but our brains were never made to multitask, which is why it's a criminal thing to text and drive. Like, we weren't built to be able to do two things well at the same time, no matter how much we pride ourselves on that. And so often, if you're finding you're working hard, if you can step away from the computer or what have you, even for 4 or 5 minutes an hour, and give your brain a rest, the brain fatigue that switches off, it can take 5 minutes of doing this exercise I'm going to talk to you about can help an hour of brain fatigue. And so what you want to do is be able to have some kind of sensory thing that your brain enjoys. So let's say you can do this while you're at the grocery store. You kind of walk into the bakery and, oh man, you start to smell the bread and it smells so good. And so what you need to do is just kind of park yourself there and just take some deep breaths and smell the bread. Just the sensory perception, giving your brain a treat. Now, you're not supposed to think about, well, maybe I need to buy 2 loaves of that bread because I got people coming on Thursday, and if I put 2 loaves in the freezer, there's none of that working out the bread. It's just to smell it. That's it. If you can do something like that, that gives your brain a sensory pleasure perception, you might be going to your door, listening to the birds just for 2-3 minutes and not thinking. Your brain loves that. And that relieves your brain's fatigue. So trying little things like that is helpful. So what we're going to do right now is brainstorm. And Kathy's just going to kind of keep track so we can kind of, we're mindful that we're videotaping this for others, so we want them to be able to hear your great ideas. So what do you find are some of the challenges or barriers to self-care? I think it's like anything else. Being able to say that 3 minutes of time is going to be worth this, or 5 minutes of time is going to be worth this. And then, as I said this morning, this has to become something that you integrate into your lifestyle, integrate into your attitude. One of the stories in the Caregiver booklet from the Now in Society that I talked a little bit about this morning, there's a whole collection of stories, and I, as I said earlier, they're mostly from family caregivers. And actually, one of the stories is from a woman named Lindsay, who has a daughter, Emily, that she talks about. And actually, Emily is who Emily's house was named after in Toronto. So Lindsay's story is in the book. And I'm not sure if it's Lindsay's story, if it was another parent who said what they try to do as a caregiver is every time they get up to get their child something, they'll get something for themselves. So if I'm getting up to get them a glass of water, I'll make myself a cup of tea. If I'm getting up to get them a blanket, I'll get one for myself. So try to kind of be creative. If I'm going to do something, whether it's for my kids or my spouse or the people that I'm caring for, how can I also make that into something that helps to feed and nourish me at the same time? That's not being selfish. That's being smart. That's being creative. So that we can give and receive, so that we can fill our cup, so that we can be nourished. Any other challenges or barriers? Yes. Fear, anxiety. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that? Okay. So a fear of falling behind, having that anxiety that I'm not going to get everything done if I stop. I just have to keep going like the Energizer Bunny. Awareness. Do you want to speak a little bit more about that? That's right. So social media has a big draw, doesn't it? Our cell phone, our computer, it's just like you just can't turn it off. And I find that with myself. I have to be so careful. And some days I'm good at it and some days I'm not. And I remember the first time that I had a job where I had a BlackBerry and I was going on retreat. Like I was filled with anxiety just to think I had to turn it off for a week. Like oh my God. And I didn't realize I was that addicted to it until I tried to step away. So I have a friend who did something that I really like. He got to the point where he said, I'm not going to respond to emails on the weekend. And I thought, good for you. And because he said that out loud, he put it out there, I never expected him to respond to emails on the weekend, and neither did anybody else. So it wasn't really that hard. So if you don't want somebody to expect you to do it, you just have to put it out there and say, you know what? I'm offline today. I'll catch you tomorrow. And then just go and do it. And people go, oh man, that's a good idea. You give them permission to do the same thing. So I think we have to keep challenging each other. Yeah, that needing to be needed seems to supersede everything else. And so part of our self-reflective practice is for us to sit down and say, why is this so hard for me? And to be really honest with ourselves. We find out a lot about ourselves and our personality by taking time to do that. So how do you know when you're not taking care of yourself? What are your what's your radar that goes up? What happens to you when you know that you're falling behind? Anger, emotionally exhausted, illness. Yeah, exactly. Your immune system just tanks. You just get every sickness. I can always tell my glands are swollen. Jeez, I haven't gotten sleep for about 3 days. Difficulty concentrating. Yeah. Yeah. You can tell that you're gone into overdrive. And the way you react to things is not the way that you want to, but you just react, you blow up. Shutting down. Yeah, absolutely. Insomnia. Can't fall asleep, and then then you're sleep deprived, and then it's just this vicious cycle. Absolutely. For me, it was always patience. If I knew that I had no patience with my kids, even when they asked me the smallest thing, I was just like, oh man, I need to step back and what's going on, because I had nothing to give to them. So how are you going to overcome these challenges to take care of yourself and maintain wellness? Let's brainstorm some ways that we're going to be able to try to give ourselves permission and fit this in. At the end of the resource sheet that I got, there's 2 books that says Michelle's Sanity Saving Favorites. And one is called A Life of Being, Having, and Doing Enough by Wayne Muller. And he just talks about this word enough. He said, we never think that we are enough. The world never thinks that we are enough, that we've done enough. And I think that the chapter that hit me in the head one year when I really needed to hear it was he talks about people who come. He also wrote a book called Sabbath, and he's a psychologist who lives out in Arizona, and he does Sabbath retreats and stuff, and they're caregivers. They're people that come that are so burned out, and they just weep because they have not taken care of themselves. And he said, I asked this social worker that came one day who was really having a hard time, what is it that you wish for? And the person said, I wish I could just get caught up. And he said, caught up to what? And that hit me in the head. I thought, caught up to what? I'm making the to-do list. I'm the one saying I can't get caught up. How much of that control can I put back into my own life to be able to not have expectations, and to also let the world know that this is enough, that we have to be able to say no, and to be okay with that. So when you are faithful to self-care, what are the differences that you find in your well-being? When you go for a pedicure, or when you go out for a relaxing dinner or whatever, what do you find happens to yourself? Better able to focus. You find your resilience. Absolutely. You feel good. And that's a total thing, isn't it? I mean, physically you feel good. Your mind feels good. Your heart feels good. Your soul feels good. It's just like, man, I need to do that more often. And so, yeah, you do. And isn't that always the way too? We always know the answer inside ourselves if we just stop long enough to listen. And it's the same thing with the people that we care for. We don't have to tell them what they need to do or how they need to be. We just have to open up a space so that we can hold space for them, listen to them. They usually have their own answers. They know what they need to do. They just need a safe place to be able to discover that and say it out loud. So do that for yourself. That's important. You can think clear. And I think even if you're trying to sit down and kind of look at all the stuff that's on your plate, when it's just all over the map, you can't. So you need to take some time out. Take an afternoon away, go to a park with a piece of paper and just sit and relax for a while. And then the juices will start to flow. It's amazing when you open that space for yourself. And then you just, even whether you're journaling or if you're someone who journals, or I went to a workshop a couple weeks ago on poetry. I never knew there was a poet in residence at Mount Sinai Hospital. It was just the coolest thing. Anyways, she just said, just start writing and don't stop for like 5 minutes. And don't even think about what you're writing, just write. Don't censor it. And when I looked at what I put in the paper after, I went, oh my God, I got some stuff I need to work through that I thought I already worked through, but it just came out on the piece of paper. So, sometimes we need to do that every once in a while and just kind of purge and helps keep us healthy. I want you to, just watch for a minute. You're going to have a stapled piece of paper there with 4 sides and the exercise that you're going to work on next. And this is there's a series of questions that I want you to kind of think through and jot this down. Again, this is just for yourself. This is not anything you're going to have to share with anyone. So Henry says, in the very act of caring for another, you and I possess a great treasure. That caregiving comes with this opportunity for inner healing, liberation, and transformation, as I talked about. And those of us who care, they invite us to listen to our own pains and to our own wounds and face our own brokenness. So there's 2 questions on the sheet that I want you to consider thinking about. Recall a particular caregiving story or a person that you cared for. Jot down some of the things that stand out in your caregiving journey with them. And then what did they give in return to you? What did you learn from them? And then the second question is, do you find it hard to accept help or care from others? Why or why not? So that's going to be the first set. The second set of questions go with the challenges in caregiving, that there are many challenges in caregiving, but as you'll see by the list, you have it on your paper, there's physical, emotional, mental challenges, spiritual challenges, challenges with balancing tension, all of these things that happen as you are in more and fuller caregiving roles. So what I want you to do in that section is just to reflect on your own caregiving experiences. What are some of the challenges that you face? And how might you begin to address these challenges? So a little bit about what we did, but maybe specific to your story. Some of you are caregivers for family members. Some of you are caregivers professionally. You do this every day. You take care of different people every day. Some of you are volunteers. So everybody's story is different, and it's important for us to get in touch with our own story and our own experiences. Henry reminds us that caregiving can be lonely and hard, but that it also changes us, because when we do it, we go into the deep waters and we return to the surface with something that can only come from the deep. And so a lot of times what happens is we have these experiences, but because we don't take the time to sit and reflect on them, to do this self-reflective practice, we miss what we were given. We miss what we learned. We miss the encounter completely because we never sat down and thought about it or gave thanks for it or saw it for the gift that it was. That's what taking a little bit of time every day will do for you as you build that into your own practice in your life. So what are the gifts and the strengths that you've discovered about yourself as you've offered care to others? How have care receivers been teachers to you? And can you name a moment when you've truly felt that caring was a sacred privilege? And how did that recognition affect you? So maybe there's one aha moment you had, or one encounter with a special person in a caregiving story. And then the last page talks about our sustainability to care. And Henry talks about the fact that he loved Rembrandt's paintings. And Rembrandt did his self-portrait 65 times through his life. Because he knew that you had to enter into all those dark and light spaces often, because you changed, you transformed. So we'll never really be able to come to the fullest effort of our caregiving if we're not really willing to paint and repaint our self-portrait in the service of others. And so no matter what our age, we're often able to look back and recognize what shaped our story. Sometimes it takes courage to do this kind of an exercise. And sometimes our older selves like to give our younger selves advice, because we're never too old to look for these dark and light spaces. So the question that I have that goes with that one is, what encouragement or lessons have you gained from your caregiving experiences that might give someone else hope? And so what I'm going to do is just put the quiet music on. And I want you to just kind of work through as many of those questions as you can. We've got the next 15, 20 minutes. Again, this is your own work. What you don't finish, you can take home with a cup of tea or a glass of wine and kind of continue this tradition of adding questions like this to your self-reflective practice. Any questions about us having 4 different steps? Step 1 really is to take stock. We talked about that already. So for you to be able to, again, to go home and really look at, what do I have on my plate? What does my day look like? What does my week look like? Step 2 is to try to enhance your work self-balance. And I think that hopefully we've been able to convince you today that that's something that's important for you to work into your life. Step 3 would be to develop resiliency skills. So when we talk about resiliency skills, that includes our self-care practices. It includes our ability to do self-awareness. It includes ways to decrease chronic stress. So what protects helpers and keeps them healthy? I used this slide this morning. So reducing chronic stress, things like mind and body awareness, physical exercise, things that will decrease your cortisol level, things like mindfulness-based stress reduction. And if you haven't heard of that, there's a lot of stuff on the website. You can pick up a book at Chapters. John Kabat-Zinn is one of the gurus in that area. It's just taking some initiative and finding a way to learn how to come to quiet, how to be comfortable in that silence, how to be mindful of your surroundings, on what's happening at any certain time, at any moment. Sometimes people will learn these practices as they practice yoga, different kinds of things. And what it does for us is it helps us to be able to be present. It helps us to be able to focus. It's the hardest thing to do is when you go to somebody's house and you're thinking, man, I got to remember that I got to get the groceries and I pick up the kids. I got baseball practice at 4:30. And we're not really present sometimes to the people that we're visiting. So how do we train ourselves? How do we find the discipline to be able to be in the moment, to be able to be very present to this moment, to what's happening right in front of me? And again, there's lots of different disciplines out there that can help us. It will help us with our self-care because it helps us to be present to ourselves. It helps us to come to quiet. It can nourish us, but it also releases stress, and it also helps us to be present to the other. So different practices like that, relaxation, guided imagery, breathing exercises, things that we give people to cope, we can do them ourselves too. So you'll find something that maybe rings true for you. Contemplative prayer, different ways of coming to quiet. So there's lots of things out there that can help you to find what works for you. You're not going to do the same thing that works for your colleague, but you have to find something that helps you to be able to focus and come to quiet. That will help to reduce stress. And so, step 3, developing those resiliency skills. Step 4, you need to make a commitment to change. And that's what I hope that this will do today for you. So the next exercise in that area under wellness plan and on the back sheet is reflect on the work you've done today. Have a look again at your self-care inventory. Think about the things we talked through on the slides. Maybe there were 2 or 3 things that really kind of jumped out at you. Yes, I do this well. No, I'm really not good at that at all. And then I want you to jot down something, this is baby steps. What's one thing that a change I could think that I could make in a week? Because it's not going to be lose 50 pounds. That's always mine, and it's never even happens in my yearly plan. But what's one thing that I think that I could accomplish in a week? Like, just be honest with yourself. And what would I need to put into place to make it happen? What's something that I could change, let's say, within the next month, if I had some time to kind of ramp up to it? And what would I need to put into place to make that happen? And what is something that I might try to put into place over the next year? And what would I need to put into place to make that happen? And it encourages you too to kind of, when you do a plan like this, to tell somebody about it, whether it's a good friend or a colleague or your spouse or your sister or somebody who might be able to gently but firmly hold you to it, challenge you, support you, those kinds of things. And we always know it's easier to do things with support and help of another person. So take that time over the next few minutes, jot down something that you think that a change you could make in a week, one in a month and one in a year, and what you would need to put into place. And again, you don't have to share this with anyone. This is your own work.
And now your work for this afternoon is done. And in our closing ritual, Michelle and I want you to celebrate yourselves. So this last few minutes is all about celebrating you. You, the caregiver, caring for yourself and caring for those that in your work. And I want to share a story with you. It's called the Starfish Story. And some of you may have heard me read it before. I read it in some of my classes. But I think it really speaks to what Michelle and I were trying to guide you through this afternoon, is that by looking after yourself, you can make a difference in those that you care for. So the Starfish Story. Once upon a time, there was a wise man who used to go to the ocean to do his writing. He had a habit of walking on the beach before he began his work. One day, as he was walking along the shore, he looked down the beach and saw a human figure moving like a dancer. He smiled to himself at the thought of someone who would dance to the day, and so he walked faster to catch up. As he got closer, he noticed that the figure was that of a young man, and that what he was doing was not dancing at all. The young man was reaching down to the shore, picking up small objects, and throwing them into the ocean. He came closer still and called out, "Good morning. May I ask you what you're doing?" The young man paused, looked up, and replied, "Throwing starfish into the ocean." "I must ask you then why you were throwing starfish into the ocean." To this, the young man replied, "The sun is up and the tide is going out. If I don't throw them in, they'll die." Upon hearing this, the wise man commented, "But young man, do you not realize that there are miles and miles of beach, and there are starfish all along every mile? You cannot possibly make a difference." At this, the young man bent down, picked up yet another starfish, and threw it into the ocean. As it met the water, he said to the old man, "It made a difference for that one." The starfish story is a good reminder for all of us that even the smallest thing can make a difference. And if we can touch just one person with a simple gesture, then we must not let that opportunity pass by without doing something. To you, it might be something small, but to that person, it could mean the world in that particular moment. I have this quote down, and it's amazing that Michelle had it in her presentation to start with, but it's something that I kind of use a lot. And the people that you care for, they may not remember your name, and they may not remember the particular thing that they did, but they surely do remember how you made them feel. And I think it's really important for you to celebrate yourself, because you truly are making a difference, whether it be a large gesture or just a small, simple hand massage. We've given there's some flowered decals on the table. They're little Post-it notes. And we invite you now to write on those, one of those flowers. Sorry. Something that that you received as a gift from someone that you were caring for. So one thing that you received from your caregiving. And then what gift you're going to give yourself.
When you're finished writing that, we want you to come forward and stick your flower on the stem so that we can form a gratitude bouquet. So Kathy and I want to thank you for being honest. We want to thank you for your sharing. We just want to thank you for the work that you do, and also for taking the time and making the commitment to care for yourself, because the beneficiaries are going to be your families and your loved ones, the people you work with, people you volunteer with, but also yourself.
And now, as we started the workshop, lighting the candle to remember those that we care for, we'll extinguish it now. So I would invite you to think about your starfish story, or that person that you made a difference with, as we blow out the candle.